Liam's words cut sharper than the silence that followed. To him, kindness was weakness, and status defined worth. But when the roles were reversed, Liam never imagined how deeply life's lessons would carve into his soul. Liam was the kind of executive who commanded respect, but not admiration. To his subordinates, his confidence felt more like cruelty, his sharp suits a shield for arrogance. He dismissed people as though their value was tied to their title, and Ava, the quiet janitor, bore the brunt of his disdain. She moved unnoticed, her efforts invisible, her dignity a silent testament to her strength. Yet, when she spoke up, offering a warning about a neglected issue, Liam's response was cutting. Stick to cleaning floors? He thought little of her words, but in that moment, the seeds of change had been sown. Liam started each day basking in the power his corner office symbolized. The polished desk, the city skyline view, and the steady hum of reverence from colleagues fed his ego. He thrived on this hierarchy, seeing himself as a self-made success who deserved his position. Beneath his confident exterior, however, was a man too consumed by his own image to recognize the humanity in those around him. His treatment of others reflected his worldview. Assistants bore his curt orders, and team members tiptoed around his temper. Yet it was Ava, the janitor, who received the worst of his disdain. Her quiet demeanor and menial job made her, in Liam's eyes, beneath notice. Comments like, "You missed a spot," or sarcastic remarks about her work ethic were routine. Ava's silent endurance seemed to irk him further. She never reacted, never raised her voice. While others might have snapped under his gaze, Ava carried on with an unshakable calm, her work meticulous, her presence unyielding. Liam, blind to her quiet strength, interpreted this as weakness, further justifying his treatment of her. One particular day, Liam entered the office lobby to find Ava scrubbing a scuff mark off the floor. Instead of greeting her, he muttered, "Maybe you'd finish faster if you tried harder," stepping past her without a second glance. He had no idea that his words carried a weight far beyond the moment, pressing deeply into Ava's heart. Despite his arrogance, Liam was not invincible. His confidence blinded him to the cracks forming in his pristine world, and his inability to see the people around him, especially Ava, would soon cost him more than he could imagine. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when Ava noticed the problem. A pipe in the maintenance room was leaking steadily, forming a growing puddle on the floor. Though she wasn't a trained engineer, years of working in the building had taught her to recognize signs of serious issues. With calm urgency, she sought out Liam to alert him to the situation. Liam barely looked up from his desk when she entered. "What is it, Ava?" he asked, his tone dripping with impatience. She explained the leak, emphasizing that if left unaddressed, it could escalate into something dangerous. For a moment, Liam stared at her as if she'd just wasted his time. "Do you really think I have time for that? Tell maintenance. It's not my problem." Ava hesitated, her brow furrowed. "I already did, but it's bigger than they realize." "Could..." Liam cut her off with a wave of his hand. "Enough. Just stick to cleaning, Ava. Leave the decisions to people who actually matter." Her face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and frustration. She wanted to insist but knew it wouldn't make a difference. Liam's dismissive attitude wasn't new. This was just another instance where her voice felt invisible. Silently, she returned to her duties, though the knot of worry in her chest remained. Days passed and the leak worsened. Ava had tried everything within her power, but the problem was now beyond her reach. By the time Liam became aware of the situation, it was too late. The pipe burst, flooding part of the office and damaging crucial electrical systems. The company faced a massive financial setback, and the blame landed squarely on Liam's shoulders. As Liam sat in the aftermath, furious and panicked, he recalled Ava's warning. It echoed in his mind, a reminder of his arrogance and how he'd dismissed her out of hand. But the realization came too late. The consequences were already unfolding, and his downfall had begun. The burst pipe was more than just an inconvenience, it was a disaster. Water gushed through the office corridors, soaking carpets, short-circuiting electrical systems, and shutting down operations for days. Employees scrambled to salvage files and equipment, their voices echoing in the chaos. Liam stood frozen, the gravity of the situation sinking in. This wasn't just a mess. It was a catastrophe. The financial impact was swift and brutal. Investors demanded answers, clients threatened to withdraw contracts, and repair estimates reached staggering figures. As the department head, Liam bore the brunt of the scrutiny. He spent hours in tense boardroom meetings, his once commanding voice faltering under the weight of accusations. "How could you let this happen?" one executive demanded. Liam had no response. It didn't take long for the truth to surface. Ava had warned him days before the incident. When this revelation reached the higher-ups, it sealed his fate. Dismissed as negligent and reckless, Liam was stripped of his role. The humiliation stung, but the worst blow came when he was informed he would need to make amends by accepting a temporary reassignment, assisting the janitorial staff in a nearby hospital. Liam's arrival at the hospital marked the start of a new reality. The sterile halls and fluorescent lights felt cold and unforgiving compared to the luxury of his former office. His uniform, plain and practical, was a stark contrast to his tailored suits. His first task was mopping floors, an exercise in humility he was ill-prepared for. As he worked, the murmurs of hospital staff and patients followed him. "Isn't that the executive who?" they whispered, their pity and amusement unmistakable. Liam's shoulders tensed, the sting of their judgment a harsh reminder of how far he'd fallen. This was a world he had never imagined inhabiting, and he had no choice but to face it head-on. The first day of Liam's new role felt like an unending series of humiliations. The mop in his hands was foreign, the repetitive motion exhausting his untrained muscles. Each swipe across the hospital floors seemed to echo the judgmental stares of nurses and patients alike. Liam, who once commanded respect, now felt utterly invisible or worse, the object of quiet ridicule. His pride fought against the work. He'd catch himself glaring at the bucket, muttering, "This isn't where I belong." But there was no escape. The reality of his situation was unforgiving. This was his life now, at least for the foreseeable future. Every task, from scrubbing toilets to collecting trash, was a stark reminder of the pedestal from which he'd fallen. Fatigue set in quickly. By the end of each shift, Liam's back ached, and his hands were raw from the cleaning solutions. Yet, it wasn't just the physical toll, it was the emotional weight. The whispers behind his back, the snickers from some of the younger staff, and the occasional pitying glance chipped away at his already fragile sense of self. Despite his resentment, Liam couldn't ignore the humanity of the hospital. The patients and their families, facing struggles far greater than his own, moved through the halls with quiet determination. He began to notice things he'd previously overlooked. The kindness of a nurse offering comfort, the silent resilience of a parent staying overnight with their child. These moments stirred something in him, though he wasn't ready to confront it. On his third day, Liam crossed paths with Ava. She was pushing a cleaning cart down the hallway, her movements as calm and steady as ever. She glanced up, her eyes briefly meeting his. "Good morning, Liam," she said simply, with neither malice nor pity. Her greeting, so devoid of judgment, left him stunned. For the first time, he felt the weight of her quiet strength and his own shame. Liam couldn't avoid Ava for long. The hospital was vast, but their paths crossed frequently, sometimes in the break room, other times in the bustling hallways. Each encounter carried a subtle tension, though it wasn't from Ava. She greeted him with the same quiet respect she showed everyone, a contrast to the pity or disdain he felt from others. For Liam, however, each meeting was a fresh reminder of his fall from grace. He avoided her gaze, often mumbling brief responses to her polite good mornings or nods of acknowledgement. The shame of their past interactions hung between them, unspoken yet palpable. One afternoon, Liam found himself struggling with a particularly stubborn stain on the floor near the ICU. Frustration boiled over as he scrubbed furiously, muttering curses under his breath. Ava, passing by with her cart, paused. Without a word, she knelt beside him, producing a cleaning solution from her supplies. "This should help," she said, her tone even and kind. Together, they worked in silence until the stain was gone. Liam wanted to say something, to acknowledge her help or apologize for his past behavior, but the words caught in his throat. Ava, sensing his discomfort, offered him a small, understanding smile before returning to her duties. Their interactions began to shift after that. Liam, hesitant at first, started asking her for advice about the job, how to handle difficult stains, how to navigate the sprawling hospital. Ava answered patiently, never bringing up their history or the events that had led him there. Her steady presence and willingness to help left Liam both humbled and perplexed. As weeks passed, Liam noticed things about Ava he'd never taken the time to see before. She wasn't just efficient, she was compassionate. He watched as she comforted a distraught patient's family or quietly took on extra tasks to ease a coworker's burden. The depth of her character was undeniable, and for the first time, Liam began to wonder how much he had missed while blinded by his own arrogance. Liam's nights became restless. The long hours of physical labor left his body aching, but it was his thoughts that truly weighed him down. As he lay in his modest apartment, staring at the ceiling, memories of his interactions with Ava surfaced unbidden. Her calm demeanor, her unyielding dignity, and her silent strength contrasted sharply with the person he had been. He started to see himself through her eyes, and the reflection was painful. He recalled the dismissive remarks, the cutting words, and his utter disregard for her humanity. These moments, once forgotten as soon as they happened, now played on a loop in his mind. Shame clawed at him, an unfamiliar but persistent sensation. At work, Liam's behavior began to shift, though the change was subtle. He no longer barked at the younger staff or avoided eye contact with Ava. Instead, he found himself observing, listening. The hospital's bustling halls revealed stories of resilience and kindness that he had never noticed before. Patients facing life-altering diagnoses, nurses working tirelessly, and custodial staff like Ava who kept everything running smoothly. All moved with a quiet grace he had never respected until now. Still, Liam wrestled with his pride. Part of him longed to prove that this role was temporary, that he wasn't like the people around him. But another part, a growing part, began to question why he had ever thought himself superior in the first place. His internal conflict deepened with each passing day, leaving him feeling untethered and uncertain of who he was becoming. It was during a quiet moment in the break room, sipping coffee after a long shift, that Liam finally voiced a piece of what he was feeling. Turning to Ava, who was seated nearby reading a book, he hesitated before speaking. "How do you do it?" he asked, his voice softer than she had ever heard. Ava looked up, her brow slightly furrowed. "Do what?" "Stay so calm, so composed, even when people like me, don't treat you the way you deserve." His words faltered, but the question lingered in the air. Ava studied him for a moment, then offered a simple reply. "It's not about them. It's about knowing who you are, and refusing to let anyone take that from you." Her words struck a chord deep within Liam. For the first time, he began to see that his struggle wasn't just with others. It was with himself. The morning started like any other, with Liam pushing his cleaning cart down the hospital's west wing. He was wiping down windows when Ava approached, her expression thoughtful but kind. "Liam, do you have a moment?" she asked. Surprised, he nodded, unsure of what she wanted. "I wanted to invite you to something," Ava began. She explained her involvement in a community program designed to help struggling individuals rebuild their lives. From career workshops to emotional support groups, the initiative focused on providing second chances. "We're always looking for volunteers," she said gently. "I think it might be good for you, and for them." Liam was taken aback. Ava's invitation felt like a lifeline, yet it also filled him with hesitation. Why would she extend such an opportunity after everything he'd done? What could he possibly offer in a program built on compassion and understanding, qualities he was only beginning to grasp? Despite his doubts, Liam agreed. That weekend, he found himself standing in a modest community center, surrounded by people whose struggles mirrored his own in unexpected ways. There were single parents fighting to make ends meet, veterans grappling with trauma, and young adults seeking a path away from bad decisions. Their stories were raw, filled with pain but also resilience. Ava introduced him to the group, describing him as a helping hand. Liam's role was simple: to assist wherever needed. Yet, even in these small tasks, organizing supplies, serving meals, and listening to participants, he began to feel a shift. Each interaction showed him the strength it took to face life's challenges head-on. One moment in particular stood out. A young man, fresh out of a rehabilitation program, thanked Liam for simply listening to his story. "Most people don't care," the man said. "But you actually listened. That means more than you know." The words hit Liam harder than he expected. For years, he had dismissed others without a second thought. Now, the simple act of paying attention felt like a revelation. It was Ava's kindness, her choice to see the best in him despite his flaws, that had brought him here. And it was her example that began to inspire him to do the same for others. The community program was a world unlike anything Liam had known. Each session began with stories, raw, heartfelt accounts of pain and perseverance. As Liam listened, he was struck by how openly these people shared their struggles, their hopes, and their triumphs. It was a stark contrast to the guarded, competitive environment he had thrived in as an executive. One evening, Ava assigned Liam to lead a small group discussion. At first, he faltered, unsure of what to say. He expected resistance, but instead, the group's openness disarmed him. A mother described her journey from homelessness to stability. A teenager spoke of overcoming addiction. Their courage humbled Liam, and for the first time he found himself sharing, too. Not as a leader, but as an equal. As weeks passed, the program began to teach Liam lessons he hadn't anticipated. He learned the value of patience in helping someone find their footing, the strength it took to admit failure, and the profound impact of simply being present. The man who once dismissed others as less than now saw their resilience as something extraordinary. Ava was his constant guide. Though she never lectured, her actions spoke volumes. Whether she was mopping floors at the hospital or organizing donations for the program, she carried herself with a quiet grace that Liam couldn't help but admire. Watching her interact with the participants, always with empathy, never judgment, became a lesson in itself. Liam's own transformation became evident during a pivotal moment in the program. A young woman, overwhelmed by her struggles, broke down in tears during a session. Without hesitation, Liam knelt beside her, offering words of encouragement. "You're stronger than you think," he said, his voice steady. "I know, because I've had to learn that lesson myself." The woman looked at him, her tears slowing. "Do you really believe that?" she asked. "I do," Liam replied, surprising even himself with the conviction in his voice. That night, as he walked home, Liam reflected on how far he'd come. The program had not only given him a chance to help others, but also forced him to confront his own flaws. In doing so, it had shown him a path toward becoming the kind of person he had once dismissed: kind, humble, and deeply human. Liam's newfound perspective began to manifest in his actions. At the hospital, he worked harder, no longer seeing tasks like scrubbing floors or taking out the trash as beneath him. Instead, he approached each duty with care, understanding how vital every role was to the bigger picture. The walls he had built around himself, walls of arrogance and superiority, were slowly coming down. His interactions with others became more genuine. Nurses who had once avoided him now shared friendly conversations during breaks. He took time to learn their names, their stories, and even their challenges. Liam realized how much he had underestimated the people around him, and with each connection, his world expanded in ways he hadn't thought possible. Ava, as always, remained a steady presence in his life. One afternoon, while they worked side by side, Liam turned to her and said, "You were right about everything. I just didn't want to see it." Ava paused, her brow raised slightly. "It's not about being right," she replied. "It's about what you do with what you've learned." Her words lingered, fueling Liam's determination to keep growing. The barriers between Liam and the participants in the community program began to dissolve as well. No longer hesitant, he threw himself into his role with sincerity. He became a mentor for some and a confidant for others. When a young father struggling to find work expressed doubt in his abilities, Liam shared his own story of losing everything and starting over. "Your worth isn't defined by where you've been," he said. "It's about where you choose to go from here." One day, Ava surprised Liam by asking him to help lead a workshop on job interview skills. He hesitated, unsure if he was ready to step into such a role. But Ava's faith in him bolstered his courage. The workshop turned out to be a success, and Liam found a new sense of purpose in helping others rebuild their lives. As the barriers in his heart crumbled, Liam began to see Ava not just as a coworker but as a friend and a guide. Her strength, resilience, and quiet wisdom had become a source of inspiration. For the first time in years, Liam felt something he hadn't known he was missing: a genuine connection to others and to himself. The hospital cafeteria buzzed with its usual mid-afternoon activity when the turning point arrived. Liam, now accustomed to the routine, was wiping down tables when he overheard two nurses mocking one of the janitorial staff. Their laughter was sharp, their words dripping with the kind of dismissive cruelty he once wielded so easily. First, Liam froze. Memories of his own past remarks flooded his mind, each one now tinged with regret. But this time, something shifted inside him. He couldn't stay silent. Stepping forward, Liam spoke with a calm but firm voice. "That's enough," he said, the weight of his words silencing the nurses' laughter. They turned to him, surprised. "Do you know how hard that person works? What they've been through? Maybe think about that before you judge." The nurses exchanged uneasy glances before muttering half-hearted apologies and walking away. The janitor in question, a soft-spoken older man named Harold, looked up from his mop, his face a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "Thanks, Liam," Harold said quietly. Liam simply nodded, his chest tightening with a mix of pride and sorrow for the man he had once been. That moment reverberated throughout the hospital. Word spread quickly, and Liam found himself earning a newfound respect from colleagues who had once written him off. But more importantly, it marked a pivotal change within him. For the first time, Liam had stood against the very behavior he had once embodied. The incident also deepened his bond with Ava. Later that evening, as they closed up the supply room, Ava brought it up. "I heard about what you did," she said, her tone light but meaningful. Liam shrugged, trying to deflect. "It wasn't nothing," Ava replied, her gaze steady. "It was the kind of thing that matters." Her words stayed with him long after their conversation ended. Liam realized that his journey wasn't just about atoning for the past. It was about actively choosing a better path. That single act of standing up for someone else had given him a glimpse of the man he could become, and for the first time, he felt hopeful about who he was growing to be. Liam's journey toward redemption began to take tangible shape. No longer content with merely learning from his mistakes, he became determined to use his experiences to create meaningful change. At the hospital, he started small, advocating for better supplies for the janitorial team, ensuring they were treated with the same respect as other staff. His efforts didn't go unnoticed. One day, the hospital's administrator called him in for a meeting. Expecting criticism, Liam was surprised to find gratitude instead. "Your suggestions have been insightful," the administrator said. "We're implementing some of them across departments. Thank you for bringing these issues to light." Hearing those words was a revelation for Liam. For the first time in years, he felt his voice being used for something constructive. At the community program, Liam's impact was even greater. He began leading workshops regularly, focusing on helping participants find sustainable employment. Drawing from his own experience as an executive and the lessons he'd learned since, he taught them how to navigate interviews, build confidence, and highlight their strengths. The gratitude and determination he saw in their eyes fueled his commitment. One participant, a middle-aged man named Carlos, stood out. After losing his job and home, Carlos had struggled to regain his footing. Under Liam's mentorship, Carlos not only secured a job, but also began mentoring others in the program. "You didn't just help me," Carlos said one evening, his voice thick with emotion. "You reminded me I wasn't finished yet." These successes inspired Liam to think bigger. With Ava's encouragement, He proposed starting a scholarship fund for the program's participants, aimed at helping them pursue education or vocational training. Liam poured his energy into securing funding, reaching out to contacts he'd once alienated in his old life. Despite the skepticism he faced, his persistence paid off, and the fund was launched within months. Through these actions, Liam found a new sense of purpose. Each step he took to lift others up felt like a piece of his redemption falling into place. The man who had once dismissed others as unworthy now saw every individual as a potential source of greatness. And in helping them realize their potential, he found a profound sense of fulfillment he had never experienced before. The day was crisp and clear when Liam walked into the community center with a bouquet of flowers and an envelope tucked under his arm. He wasn't used to gestures like this, but today was different. Today, he wanted to express something he'd never fully conveyed: his gratitude to Ava. He found her in the program's office, sorting supplies for an upcoming workshop. She looked up, surprised but smiling, as Liam stepped inside. "These are for you," he said, holding out the bouquet. Ava raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Flowers? What did I do to deserve this?" "You did more than you know," Liam replied, his voice steady. He handed her the envelope next. "It's a donation for the program. I want it to go toward helping others the way you helped me." Ava set the flowers aside and opened the envelope. Inside was a check, more substantial than she could have imagined. Her eyes widened as she looked back at Liam. "This is generous," she said, her voice soft. "It's the least I could do," Liam said. "You saw something in me when I couldn't see it in myself. You didn't have to give me a chance, but you did. And it changed my life." For a moment, Ava said nothing, her expression a mix of humility and quiet pride. Finally, she spoke. "Liam, you did the work. I just gave you a nudge." They sat down and talked for a while, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. Ava shared how she had learned to rise above the judgments of others, while Liam spoke about his growing belief in second chances and the strength it took to transform. Before he left, Liam paused at the door. "Thank you, Ava," he said once more. "Not just for what you did, but for who you are. You've taught me more than I ever thought possible." Ava smiled, her voice gentle as she replied, "Then don't stop learning." As Liam walked away, he felt lighter, as if the final weight of his old life had been lifted. It wasn't just about gratitude. It was about recognizing the beauty of growth, humility, and the quiet heroism of people like Ava. Months had passed since Liam first stepped into the community program, but the lessons he'd learned felt timeless. He often reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point, a path paved with humiliation, hard work, and quiet acts of kindness that transformed his heart. Liam had once defined success by power and status. Now he saw it in the small, meaningful ways people uplifted each other. At the hospital, Liam became a vocal advocate for equality in the workplace. He collaborated with administration to improve working conditions for the janitorial team, ensuring their contributions were recognized and respected. His colleagues noticed the change in him. "You're not the same Liam," one nurse remarked, "and that's a good thing." In the community program, Liam took on a more prominent role, co-leading initiatives with Ava and mentoring new participants. Watching them grow and succeed reminded him daily of the strength people could find within themselves. One of his proudest moments was seeing the scholarship fund he helped establish bear fruit as participants began using it to pursue education and better opportunities. Though Liam had made peace with his past, he often revisited it as a reminder of the man he never wanted to be again. The memory of his arrogance was a constant motivator to stay grounded, empathetic, and aware of others' struggles. His transformation wasn't about erasing who he had been, but about embracing who he could become. On a quiet evening, Liam and Ava sat on a bench outside the community center, watching the sunset. "You know," Liam began, "I used to think I was above all this. Helping others, working as a janitor, it all seemed beneath me. But now, I think it's the most important thing I've ever done." Ava nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "Sometimes it takes losing everything to realize what really matters," she said. "But the real test is what you do once you've figured it out." Liam smiled, feeling a peace he hadn't known in years. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he was ready to face it with humility, gratitude, and a heart open to endless possibilities. Topic 15. Uplifting conclusion. Liam's story was one of redemption, humility, and transformation. He had started as a man blinded by arrogance, dismissing the worth of others without a second thought. Yet, through the trials he faced, the quiet strength of Ava, and the profound lessons of empathy, he found a new path, one defined by kindness and equality. Looking back, Liam realized that his fall from grace had been the greatest gift life could offer. It stripped him of his superficial power and revealed a deeper truth. Real greatness lies in recognizing the value of every person, no matter their position or status. His journey wasn't just about personal change, but about creating a ripple effect of compassion and justice wherever he went. Call to action. This story reminds us all of the power of second chances and the importance of treating everyone with respect. If you were inspired by Liam's transformation, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video.